It is a never-ending loop, and it's only going to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and at some point, there is going to be a reckoning.
We realize that there is no mountain too high to climb, right?
I would do it again, but I would never do it again.
The SoundMoney Podcast.
All right. Good afternoon. Welcome to this week's episode of the SoundMoney Podcast. My name is Josh Anderson alongside Zach Davis. How are you today, Zach?
I'm awesome, Josh. Thanks for asking.
Well, good. So the listeners just heard you say to start the day that you were just at the golf course. Is that true?
Yes, it is true. My daughter wanted to go golfing today, so we went golfing.
You're a good man. You're a good man. I should have been there, but I had a problem. I'd actually worked this morning. That's a terrible thing in the world. But we want to jump in today and talk about some topics, some world topics that are going on in the world that most of our listeners may or may not be aware of, but they're things that greatly impact them, those that they interact with, and for those that really pay attention, can make a huge difference for their future. So today I want to jump in and talk about a little topic. Most people may or may not know, Zach, that throughout the history of the selling of gold and silver, in particular in the last about 40 years, so going back to the late 1970s to present, this space of gold and silver has been fraught with fraud. Probably more fraud perpetrated on people across the world in the sale of gold and silver than maybe any other space outside of some of these crazy, the original crypto booms and the altcoin era, and the tech boom and the .com boom of the 2000s, where everyone who had never even turned on a computer decided they were going to buy stock in computers. But Zach, what do you see out there in the landscape? What is it about gold and silver that's perpetrated so much fraud over the last 30, 35, 40 years?
It's a good question. You know, it's interesting. You mentioned that. My grandpa was, he was a mountain man. He would just disappear for months at a time up in the mountains. He'd cut firewood and he'd mine gold out of the creeks. And I remember my grandpa telling me that you should own gold. And, sometimes you listen, sometimes you don't. I wish I would have, because it was, when he told me that, right, years and years ago, it was when I first kind of got into college or first got married. I'm like, I really should go do what Grandpa told me and own some gold. It was $200 an ounce.
Yeah.
But here's what's really interesting. When I first got on the computer to order gold, and it was like the old dial-up, just loads line by line, the old days. I knew I needed gold. Like there's just something weird about, like, most people know they need it. But what I also knew, Josh, that was interesting, I knew I should be skeptical about buying it. And I hadn't been taught that. Like, I'd never seen a scam. I'd never seen anybody get hurt by it. But when I got on, there were so many different varieties. And there was, like, you could get bars, or you could get Philharmonics, or you could get Buffaloes, or you could get Gold Eagles. And I was like, the prices are all different. I thought gold was just gold. And I thought spot price was spot price. So I think because of that, there are a lot of bad apples in this industry that have leveraged that, right? That people, it's not like there's so many different use cases for gold or different form factors that you can buy it in, and because I think there's such a great desire for it and people know they need it, it's become a space where people have figured out that they can scam people because it's an emotional buy, and people know they want it. And so we've had scams for years with gold and silver.
Yeah, I'm going to throw something up on the screen. You say that, right? And I'm going to talk about individual scams in a minute and some of the things that go on in the world of gold and silver, and an experience I just had this last week actually on a golf course with a IRA salesman, right? And how disgusting the process was. But I came across something in preparation for today that I just couldn't really believe. The world didn't talk about this. And now I really can't believe this. I'm going to drag this over this image. So I came across this, Zach. I couldn't even believe this actually happened back a year ago, a year and a half almost, and I didn't even know, right? Maybe a bunch of our listeners saw it, right? But the Perth Mint sold diluted gold to China and got caught, okay? And then they actually tried to cover it up, right? And in the process of this, they were ordered to pay. It says that the historic Perth Mint is facing a potential $9 billion recall of their gold bars after selling diluted or doped bullion to China and then covering it up. Now, hey, at the end of the day, China's been selling fake eagles with hardly any silver content into the United States market, direct to the consumer, for over a decade, right? They actually say that 90% of all the eagles sold on eBay today are actually Chinese counterfeits. So it was a little bit, ironic, Zach, and a little bit kind of got a little chuckle when I realized that the Perth Mint did it a year and a half ago to the Chinese government. But that's a massive deal, $9 billion worth of diluted gold, right? So we see scams from every angle. We see scams from big corporations. We see scams from the Perth Mint in this case, diluting gold and silver, all the way down to the individual level. Now, I'll tell you about an experience I had this last week. I was playing golf with a gentleman who I've known for quite a while. And throughout the conversation, it came up. He said, well, yeah, did you know the job where I made the most money, where I actually got the money to start my current business. Now he's a well-to-do businessman today. So, but the job that actually got me the most money and the capital to start my company I have today actually came from me being a rollover IRA gold salesman. And I said, no kidding. That's awesome. I thought, hey, this is cool, right? Like, we got this in common. You're selling a product that we sell every day. And I said, that's awesome. And he said, yeah. And I made millions of dollars in commission. And I said, really? He didn't know that I was quizzing him to find out the details so that I could use it against him. But I said, well, tell me about that. And he said, it was the greatest job ever. People would call into this hotline. We'd run ads all over America. People would call into this hotline. They'd get on the phone, and most of them didn't know how to run a computer, which means what? They're elderly. And they're scared. And no offense, they just listened in the old days, Rush Limbaugh, or they just listened to Glenn Beck, or they just listened to O'Reilly, whatever it is. And they got scared about the way the world was, right? The media's job is to scare us every day so that they can get ratings. Well, they'd get these scared customers call in, and his job was to convince them to roll over their existing IRA into gold and silver, or to just take any cash they had in savings and buy gold and silver. The principle, Zach, would we agree, is a pretty sound principle?
Yeah, everybody should have some gold and silver.
Pretty sound principle. Here's where the crazy part was. He said that 99% of the people that called in had no business buying gold because they did not know anything about it. They did not know what spot price was. They didn't know what a premium was. They didn't know the difference between an eagle and a round. They didn't know what a bar was versus a generic round, or generic bar versus a currency. He said, and they would buy whatever we said. And he said, and our job was to mark it up 40 and 50%. Think about this, okay? This is like 40 and 50%. And then his next comment was telling, and he said, and that's how I made $1.7 million in 1 year in commission. Wow. Okay. This is a rampant problem in the gold and silver space, right? That has been perpetuated over and over and over and over. We're going to talk about a major shakeup that just happened in the gold and silver space in a minute. But Zach, tell me a little bit, like, why did when we started in the gold and silver space with a company, that we're partners in, called 7K Metals, and then a company, SoundMoney. What is it about those companies? Why did we actually start those companies? And in the process of that, what is our primary purpose there?
Oh, it's a valid question, and these issues are really why we started the company, right there. We really believe at the core that people should have physical assets, right? And whether that's gold, land, we invest in physical things. The world is virtual, but most of all our holdings are in oil, gas, land, gold, silver, diamond, physical, real things.
That's where we put our money in all our business.
Yeah, because they can't be erased with the computer being unplugged, right? But that's beside the point. But the problem is most people don't, like you say, understand what it is they're supposed to be buying, or why they should buy it, or what do they do with it once they have it. And so all of these questions really are questions that most of the people in the world have. And quite honestly, they're the questions I had. When my grandpa told me to buy gold and I went online the very first time, I'm like, oh, okay, what what do I buy? I thought spot price was spot price. I thought gold was gold, but here's a buffalo that's $250, and here's an eagle that's $10. What's the difference? Is gold not gold? And so people have all these major confusions about what they should be buying, where they should be buying it from. The scams are rampant, like you said. A huge amount of, well, here's what's crazy. You mentioned the amount of coins that are sold to the American public from China that are counterfeit on eBay. On eBay alone, it's over like 70% of all Chinese coins are counterfeit. Over 40% of all coins on eBay are counterfeit. They've been sued over and over and over again. Go look. 2014, I use 2013, 2012, 2014, 2016. Like, they get sued every couple of years for it, but they don't have a fiduciary responsibility to verify what they sell is real, right? They're just an in-between broker. You got to verify that. So, are you going to go buy a coin from somebody on Craigslist and have them meet you in the dark alley and then beat the crap out of you? Now they know you own all these coins and go to your house. Like, I literally talked to someone the other day, Josh. This was interesting. I was mentioning this, and they're like, you know what? I sold a coin on eBay. I showed up at the gas station. The guy took my coin, got in his car, and drove off without paying me. Like, that's the problem. So one of the big reasons that we started the company is because people need gold and silver. They really, really do. If you look in history, it has always been the safe haven asset. It is always what every country or kingdom or anything has fallen back on. The banks are buying it like crazy. The governments are buying it like crazy. They all know when financial ruin happens, those who hold the gold make all the new rules. So we know everyone should have it. The problem is there's so much confusion about where do I get it and what's real. And that was one of the major reasons we wanted to start the company, was to give people a place where they could buy gold and silver from a trusted source that actually had it, to be verified. We don't there's so many places. I'm sure maybe you want to talk about this, maybe you don't. But one of the big issues in the industry right now is, okay, case in point.
Go. What do
Trump gets shot, right?
Yes. Hang on.
Unless you're liberal, then you don't think he got shot.
Exactly. Some people don't think he got shot.
Yeah. The issue, he didn't get hurt, so it's fine, right? Not the issue that he actually got shot at, but case in point, go to any website right now, any dealer. What are they selling?
Some branded up, non-legal, non-licensed Trump coins.
And when's the delivery date?
Oh, that's interesting. I haven't seen a delivery date before the end of August yet. Most of them are end of September.
And I'm seeing stuff for April and May of next year, Josh. So one of the big problems is they go advertise all this stuff to you and say, buy this. You go buy it. And then they go, oh, well, turns out we actually couldn't get it. And then they got your money. And you're like, but that's the product I wanted. They go, we can't get it for you. Send my money back. Well, we won't send your money back. But what we will do is we'll give you something different. Like, it's ridiculous. We only sell what we have inventory for. We don't take your money if we don't have it. Like, we take your money, we ship your product. That's how you should ethically, morally be doing business.
At the end of the day, you and I wouldn't be in the gold and silver space at all if selling gold and silver, if these problems didn't need solved, right? If there were good companies out there that didn't do that, they didn't pre-sell coins. I'm sorry, gold and silver should never, ever be pre-sold. If you're buying from a company that pre-sells gold and silver, I'm sorry, I'm gonna swear you're a dumbass. Like, you're a straight dumbass. Okay, like, you want to buy a real commodity, you want to buy a real asset, but you're willing to wait like 8-12 weeks. You're a moron, bro.
Josh, would you prepay the full amount for a car before it got built?
Never.
Would you prepay the full amount of a house before it got built?
Never.
You don't do that, right? And those are assets. Well, besides vehicles, those are liabilities. But
be careful there.
But you just don't do that. You shouldn't do it with gold and silver either.
Never. And how funny is that, right, Zach? That we don't even pay for hotels until we stay the night, right? But we're gonna charge people for gold and silver coins that we haven't produced yet. That's the way the world works. So, life lesson number one: if you're listening today and you don't buy from us, you buy from somebody else, well, that's great. But really, you got to ask yourself, why would somebody take my money and then produce a coin later? Do they not have the capital to go buy the coin? Do they not believe in producing it ahead of time, that it's going to be a value? Do they not have enough vision and understanding to know that the product by which they're selling has value and they're not willing to risk it? I'm sorry. You're dealing with shady people who will go out of business. And I'm even talking about guys like the big guys. I'd use the J word and another symbol, but like these guys are crooks. They're out there having you buy their product before it's made. Man, I one day, Zach, I hope the FTC comes after him, because guess what? There's a law that says you got to deliver within 28 days, and all these companies hold it for 8 weeks. I hope all their owners go to jail one day.
It's futures trading. If you don't deliver inside of 28 days, you're trading futures.
Yeah, and so there's a problem happened this last week, right? I'll share this screen too that I found it's scary. It's scary. Okay, I'm about to share. I'll jump over here to an article. Some of you have maybe seen this, right? That there's been endless news stories out of California this last week with a company called Onyx Gold, right? Where tens of thousands of people have had their funds, their gold and silver stolen. They went out, they bought gold and silver. It's a company called Onyx Gold. They go out, they make a purchase. They want to buy it. They want to roll over their IRAs. I think it's the tune now, they think, Zach, of about $500 million. Nobody does any research into these people. I literally watched an interview. You can go search. I watched an interview with one guy saying, yeah, I read the reviews online. They had great reviews. I'm sorry, like, if you're at all a business person, you can fake a dang review, right? Oh my goodness. They don't know anybody that's ever bought there. They don't have any relationship, and they turn over IRAs worth 5, 10, 15, 20 million dollars. And then this company, Onyx Gold, was doing what so many others were. They wanted to get the business, so they were selling cheap. Be wary. If you see a company selling you, let's say today a gold eagle's costing $2,560. If somebody comes out and tells you they can sell it to you for $2,300, run. That's what they were doing, okay? They're out there telling people, hey, we have the best deal on gold and silver eagles. Taking the money, and then guess what? They're hoping the market goes down so they can buy, and then the market doesn't go back down, and then they never buy. So guess what doesn't get delivered to the depository in your behalf when they roll over the IRA, the custodian? The actual product, to the tune of $500 million. Okay? These are people's retirement funds. At the end of the day, Zach, we live in a world that if it's too good to be true, it's too good. There's a set price for these things and set margins that are reasonable, that work for the whole world to work. And anytime you think you're getting a special deal, it's because you're about to get taken and lose. Okay? Someone is going to take you. And they're on it. Oxford is just the newest of hundreds of companies who have scammed people in this space. If it isn't available for immediate delivery, if it isn't available for that very second, if you're going to pay below market price, below spot price especially, you're going to get taken. You're going to get taken.
Yeah, I always say poor people got poor ways.
Ooh.
Right? Poor people got poor ways. And the problem is, I don't think there's anything wrong with looking for a deal. Like, I don't think there's anything wrong for asking for a discount or looking for a deal, right? But the problem is, usually when you get what you pay for, and when you're shopping the cheapest deal, like, you can either get the best price or you can get the best service, but you're not getting both, right? It's like most of those companies who are willing to undercut all the rest of the market are probably cutting corners everywhere else because we know that they can't survive that way. And so, I mean, you just ought to be, like I say, I don't have a problem against a good deal, but you ought to be really careful, and you better really, really do your research. If you find someone who is way cheaper than anybody else, you better be really careful, because either they're selling you a counterfeit, or they don't have it and they think the market's going to come down, so they're going to wait and try to buy it low and then sell it to you, or they got some other issue going on. But going for the cheapest price is a race to the bottom, right?
Amen.
And any company that's willing to do that, they're on their way out of business, and you ought to be really careful buying from them.
Zach, it's interesting you say, I thought of something, you're saying that. I think it's probably been maybe 15 or 16 maybe years ago, you and I spent some time with a world-renowned author, and in the Stephen Covey and his family. And in the process of that, I remember it clear as day, right? He gave us a new book. He had just come out with a brand new book called, like, Help me out. It's the
Speed of trust.
Speed of Trust. You remember this, okay? Handed us his book called The Speed of Trust.
Pretty
Handed
sure
it to
that's
you
what it's
and I.
called.
Yeah, I think it was.
Trust.
Yeah, Speed of Trust. We were in like Dallas, Texas. We were doing some mineral business and buying oil in the ground. And I read it on the airplane on the way home. Read it that day, flying home the next day. Some things stuck out to me that I've forever now, from the time I read that book 16 years ago till now, I've changed the way I do things in my personal life, and absolutely have changed the way I do business, right? In that book, he talks about, he says that as a consumer level, the book's mainly about businesses and how businesses should react, and how businesses should have trust with their customers and their customers with them, and how to foster that relationship. But he said something about as a consumer. He made a reference that as a consumer, that we should never buy a product that someone that we trust hasn't told us to buy. Okay. That definitely plays into gold and silver to me, right? Like, it's why we even started the models the way we did, right? We do no outside marketing. We buy no spots on Fox News, right? We buy no spots on CNN. We've chose to only sell the gold and silver through the relationship of trust that others have who have already had an experience with our product and with us as a company. I think in the world we live in today, where there's so much false information, everybody can make a website look pretty. Everybody can say they do things. But at the end of the day, you should never buy a product unless you know someone who's bought it before you, who's can give a real review to you, like as an individual, especially when it comes to an asset. You agree?
Oh, well, yeah, 100%. I mean, here's the thing. In the day of AI, Josh, I could build a gold and silver website in 15 minutes and generate 150 positive reviews of all fake people saying fake things. Like, this is actually funny. So, this has been years ago, probably 10 years ago, maybe. My brother-in-laws, they got on this kick, or my sister-in-laws, I don't even remember who it was, but they got on this kick with Amazon, where all these sellers would start selling on Amazon, and they would reach out to people like, hey, I'll give you this much free stuff if you have to go pay for my product. I'll ship it to you on Amazon. If you write me a positive review, I'll send you this free thing. It was rampant. I don't trust 75% of the reviews that are on Amazon. I don't trust any reviews online anymore. Josh, I don't trust anything online anymore. Everything is fake. Like everything, let me put it this way. Everything can be fake. Yes. I know there's some real stuff on there still. But in the world we live in today, you cannot trust what you see online. The pictures are too good. The videos are too good. The AI generation is too good. And it's all sensationalized, right? It's like, you better be talking to someone who, in my opinion, you better be talking to someone who's actually had a real experience with a real company if you're going to go put real money in it.
And that's me, right? When it comes to assets anymore, that's why I love what we've done in the world of gold and silver, because it is one consumer, one customer having an interaction with one of our companies, buying a product, gold and silver in this case, from one of our companies, then telling another person about it and about their experience. Hey, I bought this. It came this fast. It was shipped. The company I do business with only sells things that are actually in their vault, in their warehouse, ready to ship for immediate delivery. And I bought this and it came this fast, and here it is. And it's real. It's real gold and silver, right? That is the only way that we can interact with an asset ever moving forward in the world today.
Yeah.
Or
Well, and I get a kick out of it. And like, if you can't produce the widget and you're selling it, maybe you should get the bad review, right? And we make mistakes. Like, we make mistakes. But one of the things that I get a kick out of is we'll have people that will go on a website and they want to buy a certain thing, and then they call the customer service and they're super mad at us because like, that's out of stock and I'm mad. I want you to take my money and ship it later. We're like, no. When we have the product, we'll take your money. Like, you should not be asking a company to take your money for gold and silver and then ship it later. That is how you're going to get nailed. Like,
that's how you're going to be one of the people that just lost $500 million.
Yeah. I wish we could keep all inventory in all the time, but it is difficult to judge the emotional buying cycle of people, right? But the bottom line is, I would rather miss out on a few of those sales and maybe have them go buy someplace else, and even if they're pre-ordering or whatever, and sleep at night knowing that we're going to deliver to our customers. They bought something real that we have.
Yeah, Zach, for those listeners who listened to earlier episodes about some of our experiences in Mexico with our trailer manufacturing business, that was the last time, that was 2012, that was the last time you and I ever took money for an item or a widget before it was produced and available for immediate delivery. And the reason, this is called the Sound Money, Sound Principles podcast for a reason, right? We learned some sound business principles clear back in 2012 that made it so we will never do that again. We will never take someone's dollar and then produce something and then give it to them. Never. We haven't done it since 2012 because it puts you in a situation where you may be held hostage, right, by the cartel, right? You may have to go hang out with El Chapo Guzman's people in Monterrey, Mexico, right? Like in the middle of the drug cartel's battle, right? Like, no, thank you.
It was not fun.
Not fun. And so in 2012, we made that commitment to ourselves that we would never do that again. And now it's even more prevalent today, and the need is so much greater in all things, especially in gold and silver and these assets. So we'll maybe switch gears for a minute, Zach. And I apologize to the listeners. I feel like I went on a little rant here because I a little emotionally invested in this discussion. I just get a little fired up, right, when our competition decides to be dirty, nasty, slimy, and disgusting every day in the space. And then we've got to clean up their messes every day. So,
and by the way, Josh, most people think it's like, well, aren't you glad your competitor's gone? No. When one company goes out of business, it's bad for everyone, right? It leaves a sour taste in everybody's mouth. Like, let's compete. Let's be real competitors every day and compete. Let's compete with sound principles and not with fraud, right? Yeah.
I'm by the way, I'm happy Oxford's out of business. They're fraudsters, right?
They'll
be found. The extradition will get them. But here's the sad part: the consumer will all lose. None of the consumers will get back their money. Okay, that's the real loser here. And so, to your point, we would rather have good competitors, real competitors who buy and sell the material, the metal, who participate in the same field. If they want to beat us on price by a few pennies, awesome, right? Let's compete. But fraud, not out there. So Zach, this last, I want to switch gears for our listeners. There's been a unique development in the last 10 days in the United States stock market that I just think, our listeners probably should be aware of, right? I learned something new this last 10 days that I didn't know. I knew this existed, but I didn't know it existed to this level. Okay, so for those that aren't aware, about a week and a half ago, or week, it'll be a week tomorrow for us. Less than 7 days. The U.S. stock market, right, had just back-to-back two of the most terrible days, Friday and Monday, that it's had in 50 years, right? Massive sell-offs of all stocks, all Fortune 500 stocks, S&P 500 stocks, Russell 1000, like just a sell-off. And I know there's people out there on the internet who want to talk about it and say things like, oh my goodness, it's the start of a recession. Very well could be, right? Probably is. And they want to do it. I learned something this week that I just didn't know, Zach, that I think is fascinating. I want to get your take on it, right? So we have some really influential people we pay attention to in the world, and we value their opinions. And they educated us on that whole thing started over what they call as the yen carry. You heard about this before? Yeah. I've been told about it, but I didn't understand it in full detail, right? I've been told that you and we've been approached to like invest in the yen carry, but I didn't ever dig into it enough to understand it in full depth, right? So this is what happened last Friday, leading up to Friday, but Friday was the day it happened. All these major companies, banks, financial institutions, mostly hedge funds, insurance companies, right? We're talking like Fidelity Insurance. We're talking JP Morgan. We're talking Berkshire Hathaway, right? We're talking the largest organizations in the world that move money. See, since 1985, the Japanese government has not had an interest rate. They've had an interest rate of zero. Their central bank has had an interest rate of zero. Okay. So all these companies, U.S. companies and massively traded companies, they go take loans from Japanese banks. at 0% interest. Good deal, right? Then
Great
they take
deal.
great deal. Then they take that money and they go buy their own stock. Okay. So like Nvidia and Apple and Google and Microsoft, they go borrow money from Japanese banks at 0% interest, buy their own stocks or currency. They buy the US dollar against the yen, or they buy the US dollar against the Mexican peso or the Canadian dollar. And they want to make the spread. Like our listeners, a lot of them are gold and silver people, so they understand there's a spread between the buy and the sell price of gold and silver. So if you take free money that has no interest and you get it for free, and you take and you invest it in some vehicle and you just try and make the spread, the middle ground, can you get rich? Well, absolutely, right? The problem is on last Thursday when we all went to bed and the Japanese markets opened, they're equivalent to our Federal Reserve, which, remember, we talked earlier in our podcast, is not federal, right? It's just a cartel.
No reserve.
It's no reserve. There's no reserve. It's just a financial cartel, right? That's all.
You know what? You know what, Josh?
What?
It is the biggest Oxford medal of all time.
Oh yeah, it is the biggest Oxford medal.
They're the biggest
Federal
scam
Reserve
artists of all.
Yes, they're the biggest. But so the country of Japan's equivalent to our Federal Reserve, okay? They made an announcement going into trading that night, their morning, our night, that they were going to, the first time since the 1980s, increase their interest rate to 0.25%. So that's like 0.25%. When they made that announcement, every U.S. company who had yen carries, who had borrowed yen to play this game, which they've been doing for 40 years, immediately overnight had to sell their positions, or they were going to be in trouble and losing money in capital calls every second by the second, because you can't take money that you thought was free, invest it over here, and then pay interest on it and not get yourself in some big trouble when you're only trying to make pennies, right, on spreads.
Yeah, as I say, a lot of those guys, Josh, were barely making 0.25%, but on big dollar amounts, that's a lot, right? So,
yeah, and you might buy bloodbath. So they started dumping those things to cover their margin. If you've never been a trader, Zach and I have traded options our whole life. We traded currency. We've done so much international business that we bought and sold endless amounts of foreign currency, right? Like, fair to say, Zach? So we know sometimes when you're in business in foreign countries, you have to go buy the currency in that country to hedge your place with your cash to do business. For your listeners that might not understand, it's complicated. But for you that have international businesses, you know this is common practice and it's a big deal. Okay, for trillions of dollars a day move this way. But in that moment, there had to be all these sell-offs to cover their margin calls, right? And it just was a bloodbath, right? Now the Japanese government and their Federal Reserve, their Treasury Department, decided to pull that back, at least for the short term, and not increase the interest rate to 0.25% right now. They're going to have to. They have 9% inflation as well, and so they have to do something. But this is some of the other things that's interesting, Zach. Like, and this is what I want to get to on the discussion. The number one buyer the last 18 months of U.S. Treasury notes, of Treasury bonds. For our listeners, the reason why that's important, when the Federal Reserve creates new currency. So when we're running a deficit, we say, hey, we can't pay our bills. We don't have enough money as a U.S. government. So we print more money. Federal Reserve allows us to print more money. The way that gets into circulation is actually a bond is sold, right? Last 18 months, do you know that the majority, so over 51%, the majority of all bonds were being bought with yen carry money because it was 0% interest. So we haven't even, we had this big downturn Friday and Monday in the market, but we haven't even scratched the surface. This is my take, right? We haven't even scratched the surface of what this could do to the U.S. economy, what this could do to inflation, what this could do to the U.S. dollar, because over 51% of all treasuries bonds that have been bought to create new dollars were tied to yen carry instruments. What do you think, Zach? Should we be worried? Should we be worried as a U.S. people on that?
Yeah, a lot.
Holders of the dollar? Okay, go ahead.
Most people would understand this. So most people have dealt with the school system, right? Or you've had your municipal bonds, or you've had school bonds. Like,
Bonds.
so if you really want to understand the bonds, those are sketchy anyway, but they're usually fairly honest with you in the fact that they say, we need to build a new school, so we need $19 million. We're going to do a bond, 10-year pay down, and we're going to increase your taxes by this much to pay it down, right?
Yes.
So most people understand that. What's really awesome about the Federal Reserve and the federal government is they just do that without telling you, and they don't tell you how much your taxes are going up, but your taxes have to pay all that off. So now all of a sudden people have gone and they borrowed all this money at a 0% interest rate to cover these bonds. The government's going to charge you taxes to get it back. And now the price of it all just went up. So now taxes go up, income goes down. You have this debt sitting over here that the government can't pay, companies can't pay. It's a disaster. It's like, it not only, we're already in trouble with our currency because it has no value. Now it really has no value.
Really bad. And you bring up a good point, right? So let's say that the Japanese yen carry problem, let's say it goes to 1%, which by the way has to go much higher than that. It has to, or they can't. They're going to be in a really big problem. They're going to bankrupt as a country. They'll be the next Greece, right? They'll be the next Venezuela. So they're going to raise their interest rate. Here's what you don't realize: the U.S. today, they say in 5 more years, for the U.S. Income to cover just our interest payment of our debt, at current interest rates, will be more than defense spending, for all defense spending. Okay, it will eclipse, they say, 8% in the next 5 years of total just to pay the interest. That's not any principal of our debt. But you add to it that they say in the last 18 months, 51% of all of that money has been at 0% on this yen carry. You add a 1% to that on all that back debt is with them. It's an astronomical, it's an exponential problem that goes from 8% to 15 or 20 exponentially, right? And that's where the U.S. government needs to get a handle on it. But as individuals, like, I'm not here to talk about what the government should do. I'm here to really share with our listeners, Zach, if you know this information, you have to be proactive, right? Like, I look at it and go, there's some ticking time bomb that's going to go off with these instruments, right? The yen carry just happened to bring it to light again. But there's this ticking time bomb. It's ticking. And it's going to go off one day, just like we talked about. When you and I were somewhere recently, we had to talk about what happened with the whole tokenization and internet problems that Microsoft had last month that, stopped all airlines and all those things, right? These little occurrences only make it closer and closer to a point where you will have to, at some point, I'm now a firm believer, at some point, Zach, you're going to have to use your gold and silver. You're going to have to use it. Whether that's the collectible coins that you get from 7K, whether that's something you buy online that may or may not be real. Hopefully it didn't come from the Perth Mint when they were doing that dilution. Or it's assets you're holding at SoundMoney that you need liquidity. But everyone, I believe now in my lifetime, I 100% believe it, you're going to have to use it for something, because there's just too many of these events lining up over and over and over and over that are causing catastrophic problems for common people.
Well, when you look at, go look at the very definition of a Ponzi scheme. It usually sounds like kicking the can down the road, and the last one to kick the can is going to hold the bag, right? When it all crumbles. Like when new people put money in to pay the old people who put money in already because there's no real revenue generated, that is a classic Ponzi scheme. That is our monetary system. The government is the largest Ponzi scheme that has ever existed in the entire world. And I don't say that because I'm anti-government. I say that because it's true. It follows the litmus test of a Ponzi scheme. So you're dealing with a currency that literally is printed out of thin air and then charged interest. You can't even pay the interest because you got to print the dollar to pay the interest. Like, I won't go into civics lessons on how the money system works, right? But it is fiat. It is and fiat does not mean fake. I hear people all the time say fiat currency is fake money. No, fiat means force. You're forced to use the US dollar because if the American people had a choice, they wouldn't do it because it is so weak. In fact, if you want to get a little bit nervous, when the 2008 financial crisis happened, a few years later, that I can't remember the network that got them together. There's a documentary. You should go watch this if you haven't watched it, Josh. And for the listeners, go watch this. It's called Panic: The Untold Story of the 2008 Crash. So this reporter basically got all the old players back in George Bush's era and all the people who were making all the decisions around the monetary policy and what was going on. It'll scare the daylights out of you. Josh, they were throwing stuff against the wall to see what would stick. The president of the United States turned over more power than any president of any single generation for the United States. He turned more power over to the financial sector of the government and said, we don't know what to do. See if you can fix this problem. And brought people in, and they were just, literally, Josh, they don't know what they're doing. I think one of the very first episodes we had, we talked about how money's printed, right? And the reporter talking about the president of the Secretary of Economies for the United States of America doesn't even know how the monetary system works. So it is a fragile, fragile system. We have faith in something that could break at any time. And when you go watch that documentary, like, these guys absolutely have no idea what they're doing. France. It was France that bailed us out at the last minute. I can't remember what bank it was. It was Bank of America or whoever needed $80 million or $80 billion.
Goldman Sachs.
Was it Goldman Sachs? I can't remember. It's been a while since the 2008. But the last minute, we were going into a worldwide depression. And in the 12th hour, they make a phone call to France, who had turned down the bank before for this loan. And France says, okay, we'll loan you the money. Josh, if France doesn't loan the money, we're in a global depression. Yeah. Do you know how easy it is to flip the switch? And so that's why, for me personally, it drives me nuts, the world that we live in today. It is so fascinating to me, all of the technology that is happening and all these smart and brilliant people that are creating all these things with AI. It amazes me. But on the other hand, we are losing touch with reality. We just think that we can keep living in this utopian idea that we can just keep bailing ourselves out of these problems. But at some point, this financial system is going to break, and it will be a different financial system. What it looks like, I don't know, but the government's already working on it. Go to FedCoin, right?
Yeah, they're working on it, right? They're going to have a plan, but at the end of the day, I think every single human being needs their own plan, right? And that plan should be centered in real assets. Now, so happens that we do business in lots of assets, right? We do business in gold and silver. We do business in oil and gas. We do business in real estate, dirt, farm ground, and in commercial ground. And that's where we choose. But at the end of the day, every listener, you better be doing something to take control of your own financial future around these asset classes.
Well, Josh, what is the universal language? Everybody says love, right?
Not only that,
not the universal. Do you know what the universal language is?
Go.
If you go to Mexico,
yes,
can you buy stuff with a gold or silver coin?
Absolutely, really well.
If you go to Greece, can you buy stuff with a gold or silver coin?
Yes.
You go to Colombia, you go to the Dominican Republic, you go anywhere.
Yes.
And you can buy stuff with a gold and silver coin. Do you know what was really interesting to me?
Go.
So my son is in the Spanish immersion program here in our school. So they do all their studies in Spanish, right? Your kids are in it too.
Yep.
And so as part of that, they organized a trip. We took about 28 kids to Spain, and we went and visited 7 different cities and jumped over to Morocco after. It was a great trip, right? You know what was crazy?
Go.
Nobody wanted my American money.
Isn't that interesting?
Nobody.
That hasn't been the case before.
In those European countries, you walk up there and you try to buy something with the US dollar, and they're like, they don't want it. They don't want it. But if I would have approached them with a silver eagle or a gold eagle, they would have all known what it was, and they would have all taken it. Yeah. I don't know what other asset you can buy that is universally as accepted as gold and silver and has stood the test of time. There is nothing else.
No, and I'm just going to say this to our listeners, right? This isn't a sales pitch, right? I'm not trying to sell. I don't want to come across to our listeners. I'm trying to sell them to do something. But this is information and knowledge is power, right? the reason why we started a company called SoundMoney, like the website sound.money, not sound at money, no, sound.money. The reason why we started that is because nowhere in the world, Zach, could somebody just buy. Very few people could go buy a 1 ounce gold coin. Like, I realize that the common people across this continent, across this world, don't have an extra $2,600 laying around. So we created a company where they could do it while they slept on their device for $5, $10. They could fractionally buy gold eagles. And when they had enough, we'd ship it to them. Or they could leave it in the vault. They could turn it back into fiat currency around the world, right? In like endless currencies. It's because the world wasn't solving this problem that we now know is a problem. That's the only way to have any good financial security and really well financial health is around having some gold and silver. And so, whether you buy it from us or not, I don't care where you buy it. But if you can't buy a full ounce of gold, then be buying it fractionally at Sound Money. Get started. This is, I wish we had more time. I wish I could go back to 2008, Zach, and not do all the other business things I did since then and do this. Not to make more money, but to help more people. Because we are a lot closer to the finish line today than we were in 2008. 100%. Where you're just not gonna be able to go buy it. You're not gonna be able to go get it. And so,
well, and what you just highlighted, that is the real problem, right? Is, in fact, yesterday I delivered some hay for some customers that bought some hay from me, and they asked me, what else I was doing whenever I mentioned gold and silver. Like, oh, I wish I were rich so I could buy gold, but I don't have $2,500 today to go buy an ounce of gold. Josh, it is not desire. It is not because people don't want it. It is because they can't afford it. And so, that whole idea, and thank you, cryptocurrency. I'm not a huge crypto fan, but because of the technology of cryptocurrency and what got put in place, we were able to leverage some of that and create that really cool product where you can fractionalize it and buy it $5 at a time, right? So there's no excuse anymore for people not owning it.
No, there's no excuse. One of the funnest things for me, Zach, I love to get up in the morning, and I love to see the thousands and thousands of people who buy gold and silver while they sleep from us. And I do this weird ritual. So, by the way, if you're a listener and you buy at Sound Money, know that I check you out every day.
He's a creeper.
Creepy. I'm a creeper. But I really love to see overnight the thousands of people who make a purchase, how much they buy. Do you know the average? This is interesting. The average purchase there is $25 average. And yes, there's people that buy thousands of dollars. There's people that buy $5. But the average most days is $25. And every time I look at it, every day, it makes me smile. It makes me smile to know that when we saw these problems out there in the space of gold and silver, we saw these crazy things, fraud, rampant, that you could make a difference. And that we could make a difference at the personal level of an individual in their individual family, right? And do it for them, right? So keep it up. We love seeing it, but at the end of the day, we're here because you need it, right? And some days I wish, Zach, that you and I could go back to just being retired bums. We were that before in life. But somehow we both feel this impassioned pull that people need this information and they need opportunity. And so I'll let you close out today, Zach, as we close out an episode here at Sound Money Podcast today about gold and silver.
Yeah, and hopefully, Josh, people don't feel like this whole deal was just a sales pitch because, like you said,
it's just a rant. I'm just upset. I'm upset at our competitors. I'm upset.
Yeah, you can go buy anywhere you want to go buy.
Yeah.
All we're saying is be dang careful, right? Do your research. I was actually at a dinner with Robert Kennedy, and whether you align with him, whether you don't, like sound money, sound principles. It doesn't care. It doesn't matter who said it. If it's sound principles, it's sound principles. So get rid of your bias, right? And so he was actually talking about vaccinations and all this kind of stuff. Somebody was questioning on, trust the science, trust the science, trust the science. it was really interesting because his perspective, what he said, Josh, is we've never trusted the science. Science is the art of questioning.
Amen.
So we should question everything. We should not trust the science. When the science comes out 20 years ago and says you should not eat salmon, we should question that. Because now they say you should eat salmon. Like the science changes. So you and even said about the government, you should never trust your government ever. It is why we have the government system in the United States of America that we have. It is the system designed to be questioned. That's why you can vote people in and vote people out, question what they're doing. And we have different branches that hold each other accountable. So long story short, you should not feel guilty about not trusting somebody. And you should not feel guilty about not trusting what's going on with the financial system. And there are going to be lots of people out there who are like, oh, your tinfoil hat, all this stuff, whatever. They don't pay your bills. Like they don't put money in your bank account. So I think people really need to wake up today and start thinking. They need to just question. I tell my kids this at school. And people are like, oh, you need to teach your kids to respect adults. I do. But they should also question their teachers. Because not everything is true. Like people need to learn the art of questioning everything. And I'm not talking about like cynical skepticism. I'm just talking about people should ask genuine questions. And if you do, I think what that will lead you to is an understanding that you really do need to do something different with go start questioning the financial markets.
Yeah.
Pretty quick, you're going to find out how manipulated the stock market is. When the prices can be moved by Elon Musk sending out a tweet, you're telling me that's something that we ought to put all of our retirement trust and faith in? You should question everything. So I think at the end of the day, most people are pretty smart, but we get lazy and we don't want to think. And so you should do business with people that you know, like, and trust. You should question, and you really should be skeptical about everything that's going on online today, right? And I think you should be buying from people that have experiences in places where they can say, yeah, I bought it here. This is what I paid, and it showed up and delivered. You'll be a lot happier.
You will, Zach, and we appreciate the listeners and taking the time to listen today and allow us to rant a little, right? We live in these spaces, you and I, like we live and do business at a large scale in lots of different business verticals. And this just happens to be one of them, but we're a little passionate sometimes, right? Because we set out to help people and we set out to make a difference in the world. And so when other people do it wrong, right, it gets under our skin a little. It gets a little fired up. So apologize if you feel like we're a little fired up today, but we are. So till next time, until next week, I want to say have a great week. Can't wait to see you again on the Sound Money, Sound Principles podcast. Zach, have a great one. Talk to you soon.
All right. See you guys.